Hi, my name is Caroline Bretherton. Welcome to Get Cooking. This is the class that we normally teach at Duke in the chef's kitchen, which is where I am today. But due to the mask mandate, we're not allowed to cook without our masks if I had a class here, and I need you guys to touch things and smell things and taste things. So we're doing it online for this semester. Hopefully we'll be back in person next semester, so if you get the email from Duke Dining, make sure you sign up. I'm going to make today mac and cheese two ways. All the recipes we're doing in this class are kind of designed to be done in a dorm room. It's just a one pot, one hob kind of thing. It's not difficult. You should be able to find most of the ingredients fairly easily. Great, and this one's kind of like about learning how to make a sauce, but also about like finishing things off in a little bit of kind of your own special way if you want to do it in the stove afterwards, in the oven afterwards. I'm going to show you two ways of doing it basically, which is why it's called mac and cheese two ways. To start with, I'm going to put the heat on under this baby here. I'm using a kind of a smallish pan. I'm not cooking the macaroni in here, I'm just making the sauce in here. So because it's not that much of sauce, I'm only using a cup of milk, so I don't want, a giant pan. Obviously it wouldn't make any sense. So to start off with, I have got 2 tablespoons of butter, which I'm just going to pop in here and melt slowly. Now what I'm teaching you here is a classic bechamel sauce. It's one of the kind of main sauces that you kind of learn as a chef that kind of goes into so many different things. Then you can add things to it. So we're going to add some like sharp cheddar to this to help it with the mac and cheese. You could add dried mustard, you could add Worcester sauce, you could add like a little bit of sriracha. You could just zhuzh it up however you want. I'm going to stick with a basic recipe because I think that everyone should know the basics, and then they can add to them however they like. Okay, so I'm just melting this butter here, taking a surprisingly long time at this point. I have, when it's melted here, 3 tablespoons of flour. I'm also going to move my board because if I put my pan here, it's going to burn the board because it's made of plastic. There you go, so we're going to keep that here. As soon as you've got that melted, which is nearly now, as you can see, trouble is every time I turn this sideways so you can see inside it, it takes it off the heat and it takes longer to cook. One of the things I learned teaching this class after about a couple of sessions is that everyone kept on doing this all the time and things wouldn't cook, and I was like, guys, you need to keep your pans on the stove. It's just, I don't know, it's instinctive. People kept on picking it up, so that's a no-no if you want it to melt quickly. Okay, so we have that there. I'm going to take this off the heat. When you get kind of better at it, you can do it on the heat as well, but it's quite tricky to get it right, the right consistency, so I'm going to do it off the heat because you get far more control. So take your flour and pop it into the butter. Then take a small whisk. You need a whisk that can get into the edges. Can you see I can go around the edges there? I have a larger whisk here, but because I'm only using a small amount of stuff, I couldn't really get all the way round, so a smaller whisk would be better. If you only have a big whisk, it's fine, but just remember to go around the edges because that's where the flour, if it hasn't blended with the butter, that's where it's going to burn. Right, so once it's well amalgamated, we're going to just add a little bit of milk at a time. I'm using full milk because I like that kind of creamy consistency. You don't have to. You can use 2% or fat-free if you really must, although it doesn't actually taste to anything. Put a little bit in and go all the way around again, tipping it this way and that to make sure that it's completely amalgamated. The thing that gives you lumps in sauce, like flour that turns into lumps, is if you don't have any fat in it. If flour meets fat before the liquid goes in, then you shouldn't have any lumps as long as you blend it properly. Trying to add flour afterwards without fat is just going to make it lumpy. So there you can see it's actually starting to thicken a bit because there's still some residual heat left in the pan. I'm just going to pop the rest of that in there. It's a cup of milk altogether. You may need a little bit more, you may need a little bit less. I'll explain why in a minute. Obviously it depends how quickly you cook it as well, how high your temperature, it might start to boil. And once that's completely, sorry, I know I'm tipping it away from you, but I want to get all the edges. Once that's completely amalgamated, and you can do that and see around the edges there's no lumpy bits, then that goes back on to the heat. I can bring my board back, put that down there. And I'm going to put a little bit of salt and pepper in it at this stage. I love these things because they have like inbuilt grinders. So if you're in your dorm room and you only have that horrible pepper, get one of these. They're like $4.99 or something, but you can grind your own pepper. as opposed to using those terrible little sachets they give you. Salt, I don't trust this pourer, so I'm just going to pour it into my hand and then put in as I need. You can put more salt in later. You're going to add cheese to this, and cheese can be quite salty, so I would suggest altering the seasoning right at the end. Okay, this is going to start to heat up, especially if I turn it up a little bit. These are so unusual, these burners. They're very responsive, so they come very quickly, but I never know quite what to put them on because I have an old-fashioned oven at home. Okay, starting to steam here, not yet thickening. I'm not going to show you until I lift it so it actually thickens. I'm, again, whisking pretty much constantly now. This whole process takes like 3 minutes. It's not hard to whisk constantly for 3 minutes. Make sure you get those edges. That's where it's going to catch. I'm going to leave it now because if I whisk it all the time, I can't actually see when it's starting to bubble because all I can see is the bubbles that the whisk's making, not the bubbles that the heat's making. So, starting to slowly move, and it's starting to thicken. So, I don't know if you can see that. It's not thick, but it looks more like half and half than milk at this stage. It will take literally 2 more minutes. Probably by the time it comes to the boil, it's going to thicken. Again, because you haven't got much liquid in this pan, you've got quite a wide surface area. The heat is evaporating much more quicker than if you had a smaller pan with a smaller surface area on top of the sauce, as it were. So it's actually thickening incredibly quickly now, which is great, which is what we want. I'm going to turn it down because I don't want it to overcook because we're going to mess with it in a minute. Okay, so can you see? I don't know if you can see the bubbles. As soon as I move it, it starts bubbling. Can you see how nice and thick that is now? Okay. I got it down to 5, so that's like a really low heat. And you just cook this out at this stage for like 2 minutes. What you want to do by cooking out, when you say cooking out, it means you're cooking something to get rid of the raw flavor. So we do a curry in one of the other classes. We cook out the raw flavor of the curry paste. Here we're cooking out the flavor of the flour. It's going to go in the oven, this, so again, it will cook more, but some people just like to eat it straight and not finish it in the oven. I like to finish it in the oven, so I'm going to show you that way, but you could just eat it once the pasta's gone into it. Okay, that looks actually incredibly beautiful. Silky, smooth, thick, and took like 3 minutes, right? Here I have about half a cup of grated cheese. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about grated cheese, but I'm going to add this first. I'm not going to add it all, just nearly all. Keep a little bit back. There will be a reason to that later. I'm going to go in with a wooden spoon at this stage because I find it easier. And just stir it in. Now, I am using sharp cheddar. Obviously, I'm English, so cheddar is a very English cheese, but it's also nice and strong. And, you know, cooked macaroni is pretty bland, so it needs some flavor in it. I know that it's very common here to buy those kind of grated, pre-grated cheeses, but when you buy pre-grated cheese, it has this like coating of actual cellulose on it, which stops it sticking together. You know, it looks kind of a little bit floury, that's the cellulose. And what happens is if you use that to make a sauce, that coating thickens the sauce much more than it would normally. So if you're using that grated cheese, fine. No judgment here, but make sure that you have some extra milk on hand because it might thicken more than you expect. So I'm using natural, pure, unsullied English cheddar, and it's looking very nice here. I don't know if you can see that. It's got a nice kind of drip to it. You want it runny enough that it's going to run through the pasta nicely, but you want it thick enough that it's going to kind of bind it together. So there you go. A couple of little lumps left in there. I'm probably going to turn that off now because, again, the pan keeps the heat, the sauce keeps a bit of heat, it keeps cooking. I'm going to taste it. I'm allowed to do this because I'm the only person eating it, but obviously if you're cooking for someone else, don't do this. It's really good. That cheese is so nice. Yeah, get that cheese, definitely. It's called unexpected cheddar. I don't know if I meant to say that, but anyway, it is. Okay, bit of black pepper in there. There was a reason for me tasting it. I wasn't just being greedy. Okay, now I have here some macaroni I cooked earlier. There's no point you guys watching me cook macaroni because everyone knows how to cook pasta. The secret, in this case of cooking pasta, is plenty of boiling salted water. You cook your pasta off as how you like it. Slightly undercook it rather than overcook it because, again, it's going in the oven. When you've finished, put it into a colander, rinse it under a cold tap till it's cold, and then run a little bit of olive oil through it. That will stop it sticking together. So now you can see this is all nice and lovely. Whereas if I'd have just put cooked pasta on the side, rather like cooked noodles, which is another dish we do, it just sits there in a big clump, which obviously you don't want. And then I'm going to pop in, I'm not going to put all of it in to start with, because actually I did do 2 cups, which is the recipe for 2 people, but I'm going to stir in a little bit at a time and see what it looks like to me. Yeah, we have plenty of sauce here. It's quite thick, this sauce, so I'm actually going to take, I think I may have used slightly more cheese, which thickens it. I'm going to take a little bit of the extra cute bottle milk and stir it in to loosen it up a bit. As you can see, it's a fairly flexible recipe. I want it fairly loose. I'm going to put a little bit more in. And I think for me, that's about enough for 2 people, because I'm going to add some extra stuff to this now. So I'm not going to use the whole 2 cups. Again, you can if you want to. Now, I'm going to put a couple of extra things in this. I've got here about a cup of chopped rotisserie chicken. It's just leftovers from my fridge, basically, but that's great. And I'm going to pop that in there, because this becomes a whole meal. You know, it's got vegetables, it's got meat. It's going to feed my family tonight, or whenever they need it. So pop that in like that, turn it around. If you don't have chicken, you could use tuna, you could use sliced mushrooms, but you need to cook the mushrooms off a bit first. I'm going to also put some broccoli in it. Now, if it was bigger florets of broccoli, I would pre-cook it for a minute or 2, but these are these little tiny baby ones. So I've decided I'm not going to, because I don't want them to overcook when they're in the oven. So I'm just going to chop it down towards the thick end. Yeah, I'll move that so you can see. Down towards the thick end of the stalk, but I'm probably not going to put too much of the actual stalks in. I'm going to pop that in. And because I'm going heavy on the vegetables, a little bit more milk to loosen that up, because it will need it, I can tell. There you go. And also it's starting to kind of sit a bit, so again, it's going to start to kind of look a bit gloopy here, which is why you want to work fairly quickly at this stage. So my raw broccolini has gone in, or cooked broccoli if you only have broccoli, or frozen broccoli, which actually you could finely dice and then just put in frozen, and it would just come to temperature in the oven when you cook it. It's fine. And I'm putting in a green onion. I really like green onions, and I like the kind of contrast of the sharpness, because everything else is quite smooth and sort of gooey and yummy and slightly sweet almost with the sauce. So I like a little bit of green onion. Might put a bit more in. I've got 2 here, so 2 big ones. I've used 2 little ones and a big one here. You could use red onion. You'd have to cut it really small so it didn't feel like it needed cooking. Okay. Get those in there. And that's it. Okay. So once it's all nicely amalgamated like that, you can see it's evenly distributed. I'm going to take here, I reckon most of you guys don't have like much to cook with at home, or not at home, in your dorms. At home, hopefully you do. So I'm using one of these because everyone can get them. And if you want to freeze it, you can go in the freezer really easily like that. So one of these little foil containers, I think they call them brownie pans or something, but they're perfect for this kind of a meal. Plus you don't have to do the washing up, which is always good, because I do a lot of washing up in my life. Grab a fork and just smooth it out. You don't want to pat this down so much that it's got no room between it, because the heat wants to get between the bits of pasta and kind of, you know, just wiggle its way through fairly quickly. You don't want it to be like compounded, because that won't be great at all. And then here I've got a couple of tablespoons of white breadcrumbs and a couple of tablespoons of ground fresh Parmesan, and I'm just going to scatter it on top. What this is going to do is to make a nice contrast on the top. It's going to make a nice crunch on the top, and then you get the kind of creamy gooey-ness. And the last thing, don't think I've forgotten the little bit of cheese that we left over. It's a little bit of cheese, because Parmesan doesn't really melt. I mean, it melts, but it doesn't stick things together. It's quite a hard cheese. So the cheddar mixed with the Parmesan, the cheddar's going to help the sort of topping stick together like a glue. Okay, so there we have it. It's going into an oven, a 400 oven, top shelf. You want it hot and high, so you want it crispy on top, and you just need it heated through. It doesn't need to do any more cooking, really. So 15 to 20 minutes, and when it's golden brown on top, it's done. Okay, so this has been in the oven for about 20 minutes at 400, and as you can see, it is beautifully golden brown now and ready to eat.